Okay, so this is my review of The Boys Season 2, Episode 7, Butcher, Baker, Candlestick, Maker. This was a shorter episode, one of the shorter ones of the season, clocking in at about 54 minutes. It is the penultimate episode of the season, and it actually acts as more of a setup than maybe what you would think as a crazy penultimate episode usually is. But I'm going to break down my review into a couple parts here. First, we'll start with Stormfront and Homelander's story. Then we'll go into Queen Maeve deep in A-Train, followed by Butcher's story, and then we'll end with the crazy main boys storyline. So we have this opening scene of somebody who seems like a Comic-Con goer, a big fan of superheroes, and is a big fan of Stormfront. We see how he's affected by Stormfront in the media and how she has brainwashed him into her beliefs. He kills a worker at a convenience store and says, "I saw the light in your eyes, are you one of them?" meaning a supervillain. But this also goes into the social commentary of Stormfront's storyline, being a full-on Nazi and this man seeing people of other color as a threat, and going into also the immigration part of it. However, I thought the way they presented this part of the show had no flow with the rest of the episode, had no flow with the rest of the season, and it didn't actually feel like The Boys here. It was really corny. Felt like This Is Us in a sense of the music playing in the background. Just did not like it. Really just not this show. So that was a big red mark for me in the episode. Wasn't a fan. Especially the music they choose, that soft music. And it feels shoved in there just to make sure we get some kind of payoff and set up for Stormfront's lines here in this episode. In particular, her talking about immigrants and social justice warriors we see here. And they're giving Homelander a full-on Trump-esque monologue here, talking about the past America being better, that we gotta get back to that, and then blocking borders. So it's clearly what they're targeting at here. And it goes to Stormfront Homelander's goal here, saying, is there anyone prosecuted more than us for defending our kind? We need more Compound V, we need more soups. So tying with the times, they're writing it very much like you would see conservatives say in their goals. But they write it cleverly in the show because it's tying well to Stormfront and Homelander's endgame in this Nazi agenda, and also this agenda to get more soups made by blaming a different kind in these soup villains. They also have a big moment here where they announce publicly that Starlight is a mole to the Seven. This will change Starlight's story forever too, because this is in a way is her out of the Seven, and there's no way she's going back into the Seven after this, and having her painted by Stormfront as the public villain. And they write a good reason why Homelander wouldn't just kill Starlight here, because he's saying he's not making that mistake again to keep her alive, but Stormfront's like, no, she's #1 trending traitor right now. It gets us more support for Compound V, and that a common enemy rallies the base. So they've done a good job at Stormfront and her strategy being with the times as well. A commentary on that, but also a justification for why Homelander wouldn't just kill people in his way. And you see now Stormfront sees this baby in the crowd, thinks of her daughter, and this triggers Homelander to have the idea of bringing Stormfront to meet his son, and this idea of them having a family. And you see Stormfront right away says to Ryan, "You were the first natural-born superhero." So like Butcher alluded to in past episodes, how he's like Vought's $1 million baby and how important he is just in society as a figure. It's really interesting for Ryan's plotline. And when Stormfront's talking about things that Ryan should be into, of course she mentions PewDiePie, someone who's been accused of being a closet white nationalist. And what I really actually appreciated here, which made you conflicted as an audience member, was when Becca and Homelander talk outside and how they're going to handle Ryan here. And Homelander actually makes some sense for once. And you can kind of sympathize with him a little bit here, because he's like, that kid doesn't know anything about anything. When he sees the outside world, he's going to panic. It's going to mess him up. I don't want my son to go through what I went through. So it really works well. Character writing, because this is coming from a place Homelander's experienced. It makes sense what he's saying because he's lived it. And then when Becca says also makes sense in being a protective mother and wanting to lie to him to protect him. It's a good debate here on how to handle someone like Ryan from both of their angles. But you knew at the end of the day, Homelander was going to go in his belief. And you know what? Stormfront Homelander spill the beans to Ryan here, and he freaks out and yells at Becca and says, "You lied to me. Don't touch me. I hate you." And Stormfront's like to Becca, "Don't worry. He's going to have a mother." Meaning her. But honestly, Ryan's reaction, this was going to happen at the end of the day at some point. That's the catch-22 about lying to your kids in general, to protect them from certain things, that it's going to come about anyway, and they're usually going to be pissed off and maybe more angry later in life if they learn too late. But the big thing here is that they take Ryan now, and this is good to move the storyline with Ryan and Becca and kind of maybe push Becca out of the equation as one of the less interesting characters in the show. You don't want this place where Becca and Ryan are just at this house in hiding. It bogs down in a storyline that can get boring, so I'm happy they're moving on from that now and picking it up. And it sets up something crazy to happen in the finale, you gotta assume, because now Homelander and Stormfront have this super child, so we'll see what happens. And just adds that maybe you'll enjoy this episode more seeing that a lot of these storylines are set up now to set up for, instead of maybe what you see in a lot of shows where the finale is more of a reflection of something crazy that happens in a penultimate episode, that this is the other case where maybe this is more set up, hopefully leading to a crazy finale, and we'll get some super payoff. So let's hope. So let's touch base now with the other members or former members of the Seven. So in my previous review, I said how much I can't stand Elena, the character that Maeve is in love with. She's one of those characters written in a show that you just absolutely hate as an audience member because she's so just not understanding that something we can get simply as the audience and have sympathy for Maeve, but she's just terrified of Maeve. But what really frustrates me about the writing of Elena is that she says she lies awake every night thinking about what that child must have went through that Maeve, she says, let die. And she goes, how many other people did you kill? And Maeve's like, well, I didn't have a choice. And Maeve's totally right there. But then they write Elena saying, well, I'm not blaming you. It's not your fault. Well, how does that make any sense? You are blaming her. And then if you're actually saying in the day you understand, well, then why are you lying awake at night afraid of Maeve? Wouldn't you then see her as a victim of the situation? It'd make more sense maybe if she was angled it more towards being afraid of Homelander like Maeve is, but Elena's not coming off that way. She's actually terrified of Maeve. So I felt it when Maeve threw that table. I was like, good. I can't stand Elena. And you feel bad for Maeve. She's like, didn't you want to see the real me? And this is how you're reacting. So it's tough, but Elena to me is just so hateable. So we see now A-Train and the Deep are together again. A-Train comes to see the Deep, is kind of coming over to the side of the Deep with the Collective. We see the leader of the Church of Collective is done with Eagle the Archer. This is conflicting to Deep because this is a guy who he thinks saved his life, but now he's an enemy of the group that he's a part of. This story still is pretty flat to me, and it's not really doing much of anything this season, and it suffers of the issue of the show having too much mouths to feed, and I feel like A-Train and Deep's storyline have really taken a toll because of this in the show. Especially A-Train. I mean, look where we came and how his story ended last season and where we've gotten to, and this season's almost over. Really hasn't gotten anywhere. Feels like they kind of don't know what to do with him. So jumping over to Butcher's storyline, we see Butcher gets a call from his mom, and she lies to him that his dad died just to get him to see his dad. Knows it's the only way for him to go. We learn in the scene with Butcher and his father that his father beat the crap out of him and Lenny, his brother, and that Lenny put a gun in his mouth, so I guess we can assume there was suicide there. Dad's blaming Butcher for it. Butcher's blaming the dad. That's the reason Lenny's dead. They actually call each other monsters here. And this sets up really well Butcher's storyline throughout this episode with Vogelbaum and then seeing his mom again, which we'll get to. I don't want to fully go into Butcher's story yet because let's go back to the main plot with the boys and we'll see how that all relates and ties in brilliantly. So we see our main gang here is setting up with this congresswoman to take down Vought and having their Star witness be Lamplighter. But meanwhile in this main plot line we see Starlight's mom goes to see her again to try to make peace in this cafe. And there's some good writing for Starlight's character, her saying how good guys don't win, bad guys don't get punished. What we do is all for money. Isn't that the truth just in life? And she says, I'm in the middle of it all alone. So you really feel for Starlight here and can understand where she's coming from and what she's thinking. It makes complete sense. But you see the mom says, let's get away. I cleared it with Ashley at Vought. And Starlight's like, what? And then, boom, Black Noir comes in, kidnaps Starlight. This reminds me a lot of the scene from Spider-Man 2, where Doc Ock breaks in and kidnaps Mary Jane in a cafe. Pretty cool scene. And it's really funny now that we see Hughie with Lamplighter, and Lamplighter's watching these pornos of Soups. The funniest moment being he pulls out the DVD, Starlight pulls an A-Train, and Hughie's like, I'm good. And we learn now about Lamplighter's character and how they're setting up him to die in this episode because he, we learn, was a prodigy at 4. He burnt his own house down, and his dad actually liked this, and he was proud he was a Soup. And he wanted to make his father proud in that story of his life being Lamplighter. And he says he feels like he's the cuck in the porn, watching the superheroes do all the effing. I did think some of the writing was weird, though, how Lamplighter was really brutal to Hughie at first here. I don't think it matched where his character ended and grew to by the end of last episode. It almost felt like they filmed that scene first, which they may have, and may have led to this inconsistency, but it feels like a little bit of a botch job, especially when he calls Hughie a cuck fluffer and it's just really harsh to him. It felt weird and out of place. But they get it back on track with how Lamplighter was last episode at the end as we go forward, and you see now he convinces Lamplighter to come with him to save Starlight, because he's like, you don't have to be a cuck, this is your chance to be a hero. Or as he says, be the guy who F's the wife. And I love the line Hughie says here, he's like, well, let's go F the wife. And he's like, consensually. That was great. And we get this shocking moment where we see when Lamplighter and Hughie get to Vought, and they're in the conference room, Lamplighter sees his statue's not there anymore. Reminds you a lot of Deep in a way, the way he reacts to this and is crushed. He's like, I just wanted to make my dad proud. Burns himself alive. Good God, that was just crazy disturbing. But this actually freaks Hughie out, thinking he's gonna screw stuff up, but it actually really helps Hughie because it sets the fire alarm off, which gets the building to evacuate. So that's the justification for why it seems like the building's so empty and why isn't security better. It's because they're leaving the building, and it's getting Starlight to escape because it's a way for the alarm to activate her powers. So it's actually a really clever way for them to justify how you would get Starlight out of this building. But I love this little foreshadowing because when Starlight comes out, right before she's attacked by Black Noir in the hallway, she stands right in front of a picture of Maeve, who's going to be the one at the end of the scene who saves her. And when Maeve comes through and saves her from Black Noir, we get a payoff with this Almond Joy product placement we've gotten, and that he has a tree nut allergy. I saw a lot of people have been complaining about the product placement of the show on Reddit, where I've said it's actually been good product placement because it actually serves the story, and that comes through here with the Almond Joy. And with the Fresca, I think that's already been justifiable because it's kind of like this cultish drink that there still may be something in that, like don't drink the Kool-Aid kind of situation. So I would argue this is good product placement because again, it's kind of served the story in both ways. Whereas I've said in other shows, especially on Netflix, it doesn't do that. They just drop in something and actually say ads in their shows. I hope this isn't the end of Black Noir though. I think people want more payoff with his character. Hopefully he doesn't die here and that someone saves him, which I hope they do because you want to know more about him behind that mask. But a weird moment here when Starlight and Maeve are about to leave and Starlight's like, come with me, Maeve, and Maeve just nods her head no. Okay then. Don't really know why, but so be it. I think we know why because they wouldn't know how to write that scene with Maeve being with Hughie and Starlight. But I like how Hughie accidentally ends up saving Starlight's mom, thinking he's opening where Starlight's locked in, and he's got the hand he's holding. I thought that was just really funny. And I love how it worked where he sees Starlight in the hall. It's a really good moment between him and Starlight and her seeing he came to save her. Now, before we continue that plotline, let's reverse a bit and go to when Mallory and MM go to see Vogelbaum, because they're going to really need Vogelbaum in this episode as a witness because now they have lost Lamplighter, which obviously they don't know yet, but we'll see this will pay off huge that they even went after Vogelbaum. Well, technically it doesn't actually pay off in the end, but we'll get to that. So they do have some really good writing here with Mallory and Vogelbaum because Mallory's like, look, let's just get Vought back. There's no reason for you not to testify, but he says he's got his daughter there, and he's right that he's like, if I testify, I'm risking my family's life and the belief that some things are more important than the right thing. So this really sets up well the theme of this episode, and it leads to this next scene where Mallory actually has a line to Mother's Milk and is like, Vogelbaum's not wrong. You should just leave and go with your family. And you see Mother's Milk's like, I'll take you up on that when this is done. And she's like, it's never done. You have to let this go. You're not going to get justice for your father. You're not going to get revenge on Vought. But what will you have is your family. And isn't that the truth? And this is something that Mother's Milk's going to struggle with. And now we're going to see how this theme actually handles Butcher, because Butcher now takes a stab at Vogelbaum. And we get this great scene with him and Vogelbaum, because Vogelbaum explains to him that Homelander needed to be the strongest man in the world, but he didn't even want it. It was for me. So this is going to cause a confliction a bit in Butcher's head, because he's always seen Homelander as just this awful person. But hearing that his childhood, he was innocent at a time and had some really bad shit happen to him, makes that a little bit harder for Butcher. And Butch goes to Vogelbaum, well, that wasn't your only sin. You hid my wife away from me. And that wasn't even Homelander who did that. And you see Vogelbaum's like, well, you weren't on my radar. And then he's getting these great lines, Butcher, where he's like, what's your radar telling you now? And I love Butcher in response to Vogelbaum basically saying if he testifies, he's risking his family. And he's like, your family's already in trouble. And he goes full psycho eyes here. Karl Urban is the best at this. And Butcher knows that he can just use that same fear that Vogelbaum has and the reason he's not testifying to get him to testify. And I love he just puts on the charm when the daughter comes out and takes the tea from her. And that, again, you always see these comparisons between Homelander and Butcher, and that's one of the biggest that they're able to do that, where they can go psycho mode, actually do anything to get their way and kill innocent people if need be, but they can just snap into charm right after. Pretty scary. So as you see, he convinces Vogelbaum. So this is huge because when the crew realizes they've lost Lamplighter as a witness, he says, don't worry, I've come through. But he goes to see his mom real quick. The mom's like, I didn't do it for him. He's a cunt, which is great, just to hear her say that like Butcher. But she says, I just thought when you'd see him now, you'd see how helpless he is and you would let it go. And this ties to that theme about letting go. And what Mallory was talking about to Mother's Milk. Letting go of this want for justice, revenge, hate, holding on to it. And maybe you can go far as to say that there is some little seed there, in his subconscious at least, that Butcher now knows Homelander isn't just this story of evil that he might have thought. And maybe there is some hopelessness and helplessness to him that he might need to realize and let go a little bit of his hate towards Homelander. You see, the mom's like, the reason she did all this, she wouldn't want this to have a hold over him, his hate for his dad. And you wouldn't become like, she says, meaning the dad. And you can connect that even further and say, in your head as the audience, you know, his hold for so much hate hopefully doesn't become like Homelander, and feels like it goes to this long theme they're building of Butcher's story, where wanting revenge, to do anything you can to get payback to someone you hate, might actually make you become the man you hate. So this all really paid off well here for Butcher's storyline, the writing in Butcher's story, connecting with Mallory, Mother's Milk, and Vogelbaum, and that whole theme about letting go and what's important really at the end of the day. So again, want to just touch base. There's a quick scene here with Frenchie and Kimiko. They're on this rooftop protecting the Congress lady. We see Kimiko's now finally teaching Frenchie a bit how to speak her language with the gun. It's so strange though how at the beginning of this season, this relationship between Kimiko and Frenchie was like a main point, and they kind of just left it behind for a while, and they touched into it a little bit each episode, and it wasn't that good. And this also feels like it suffered the weight of too many mouths to feed, and you realize like, okay, we have one more episode left, and now we're here with Frenchie learning a little bit of Kimiko's language, and we really haven't had much character progression of Kimiko in that sense either, where it was moving quickly in the beginning and now it's like completely hit a wall. So that's also disappointing as well. And it's starting to make me think this season probably can use 10 episodes instead of 8, because it seems like a lot of stuff they've set up, there's no way it's all going to get enough screen time and payoff with one more episode left. It's just impossible. And if you keep doing that as a show getting bigger and not giving enough time to things you've set up in one season and save it for the next season, you can fall into some traps The Walking Dead did. I'm not saying it's anything like The Walking Dead, but I see little mistakes coming in its sophomore season that show criminally made to make it worse as it went on. You don't want to start dragging things out. So let's go to this big final scene. I love how they shot this. I love they have the boys watching on the TV of the courtroom, and you see Vogelbaum's wheeling in. This is Butcher especially, his big win now. I love they show him watching on TV, showing Homelander's face and the loss on Homelander's face when Vogelbaum comes in and Butcher's like, gotcha, cunt. But just when the boys are about to get this huge victory, take down Vought, heads start exploding. Even Shockwave's head exploded here. I guess good news for A-Train. And I love this quick shot they got of Deep watching while this is happening on the TV, and he just checks his head to make sure it's okay. I also love they showed blood all over Ashley real quick too, kind of just symbolically showing you how much blood has just been on her in supporting Vought and doing anything to get a leg up. And I love they end now on the Butcher being really pissed. It ends on a real exciting note and cliffhanger here. So there was a lot of really good in this episode. I think this is the second best of the season after episode 3. I'm going to give this one a 9.3, and that's in particular with Hughie, Starlight, and Butcher, and Lamplighter's story here I thought was really, really good. I also thought Stormfront and Homelanders, I was happy it picked up the pace with Ryan and Becca, but I think it's kind of suffering a little bit here in Kimiko, Frenchie, A-Train, and the Deep stories, and might give you subconscious feelings watching of like, all right, this finale better be really, really good for this season to maybe actually pull off being better than season 1, and if it's not, I don't think it will be better than season 1, because there does feel a little feeling of disappointment as a season as a whole watching this episode. That's how I felt. But I still think this was a really good one, and I'm excited to see what's going to go down next week. Let me know what you thought of it down below. I love to hear your thoughts. I read every comment and try to respond to as many as I can. Please make sure to subscribe so you don't miss one of my reviews of The Boys. And if you like watching what I do here, all I ask is a small donation of $2 a month. You'll see a PayPal link down below in the description. It will really help me do more videos and hopefully one day do this full time so I can get more reviews out to you guys and cover more shows and movies. And if not, just subscribing on YouTube in general helps so much, so I'm grateful for anything you can do to help support. And please follow me at Steve Varley Show on Twitter and Instagram for more of me, and I'll see you next time.